my father went into hiding with a police officer in the north of the country, in the rural area of the Netherlands. They were evangelical Christians hiding my father and his brother, youngest brother. And my mother could stay with her family, her parents and her brother and sister at home for a while, but then they were rounded up eventually in 1943 by the Germans and sent first to the Dutch concentration camp Westerbork, where my mom ran a school. The Germans wanted her to run a school as if life was normal. And it was not, far from that. But so she ran the school, and Frank at some point was a student of hers in that school. But of course she didn't know yet that that was a special thing, and Frank wasn't famous yet at that time. Then they were, in 1944, they were transported to Bergen-Belsen. The circumstances were really very, very bad there. They all got sick. Tuberculosis, typhus, all those terrible illnesses they got. There was no food, there was no hygiene. And then in April, they were really, really very sick and in life danger of illness. Then in April 1945, they were put on a train eastwards because the Allied forces closed in on Bergen-Belsen, and the Germans wanted to destroy all living evidence. So they sent every living person in Bergen-Belsen further east to kill them either with an explosion of the train or in a gas chamber. And then on April 13, 1945, the train was stopped and there were bombs and they were scared and they didn't know what was going on. And it was the 9th American Army, the 30th Division of the 9th American Army, that liberated the train on that day, April 13, 1945. And that is the day that I remember all my life. Every year, my mother would celebrate April 13 as her day of liberation of her family. So we celebrated that every year and would give thanks to the Americans. And then after the war, right after the war, my father had made it through the war in hiding, and my father and my mother found each other back. So in 1946, they got married.
So fast forward to 2014. We now live in Los Angeles, and we get an email from one day to the next that says, you gotta come home now because your mother has fallen and it doesn't look good. So we jump on a plane, we land, and got to see Evelyn's mom, thank God, just in time, because the day after she passed away in her own bed, as was not the case for so many, in fact, 6 million of us, as we all know. So we were in Evelyn's parents' home. Her dad had passed away already a couple of years before that. And we were in her dad's library. Evelyn, her 2 brothers, and all of the spouses, 6 of us in total. And somebody picks a book from a shelf, and out falls a piece of paper. So we pick it up and we look at it and we see it's a very old piece of paper, and that it was typed on one of those old typewriters. And then we look at the date and we see that the date is May 29, 1945. And we start reading, and it appears to be a love letter from Evelyn's mom to Evelyn's dad. And it describes how she arrived after hitchhiking through destroyed Europe at the Dutch border, and how she ends up in an empty home. And guess what? She bumps into somebody they both know, who tells her he is still alive. So she writes this letter, and she says in the letter, Evelyn's gonna get the letter, because we have it, of course. And she says, I'm giving it to this Red Cross official who is here, hoping that it will reach you. which it sure did, because 70 years later, we found it in his library. We had no idea of the existence of this letter. So this is the letter. As you can see, old and with the date on it.
Yeah, May 29, 1945.
So it then goes on, the letter, to detail that train liberation to a level of brutal detail that neither Evelyn or I had ever heard of her. And by the way, Evelyn and I are together for 38 years. So I have heard the story 38 times. And we never, ever heard it to that level of detail. So clearly a very special document. And Evelyn, not knowing what to do with it at that moment, made a copy of it. And so when we left back for the States where we lived, we had the copy. At that moment, we moved in LA from Los Angeles, where we lived then, to Columbus, Ohio, where I started a new job and where, of course, we knew nobody. Until Evelyn, after a week or so, said, wait a minute, there's somebody out of my activism network that I think lives here in Columbus, Ohio. Let me look him up. She Googled him, and sure enough, the guy lived there, not a Jewish guy. She invited him for dinner. He came over, the two of them caught up. It was a very nice evening. And at some point, he'd heard we were both Jewish. He wanted to know the story of our parents. Evelyn shows him the letter that we just discovered. And he said, unbelievable, what a special story. Would you mind? I have two friends who live here in Columbus, Ohio, who are documentary makers. Would you mind if I share your story with them? And Evelyn says, sure. A week later, she gets a call from The Blaze Television. Some of you might know it. It's an internet TV station. And they tell Evelyn that they're about to produce a documentary about the resurging anti-Semitism in Europe. And they don't want to do it through facts and figures. They want to do it with a person's personal story. And they heard about Evelyn's story, our story, and they loved it. And so they wanted to make a documentary about the backdrop of our parents' Holocaust story, then Evelyn's story about her activism, and the reason why we left the Netherlands to go to the United States. Then Evelyn's quest about what is driving this new anti-Semitism, et cetera, et cetera. So they asked Evelyn, do you want to become the protagonist, if you wish, of this documentary? And Evelyn said, sure. So the team got the letter, translated, they started their research, and they found a 98-year-old veteran of the 30th Infantry Division of the 9th American Army. The person that opened the train door, the person that liberated Evelyn's family. And so 70 years after the Holocaust ended, 3 months after her mom passed away, they flew out Evelyn to meet the liberator of her mom, for Evelyn to say thank you to him. That obviously was a very special day for Evelyn. Ever since then, we had, for a year, we had two guys following us everywhere we went. And the result is this documentary, Never Again Is Now.
And you will also see my meeting with the... The documentary that you're going to see has 4 parts. The first part is the story of our parents during the Holocaust. The second block is what we experienced in the 21st century in Amsterdam, in Holland, of anti-Semitism. We grew up virtually without anti-Semitism. We were born and raised after World War II. But in 2000, that started to change. So you'll see in the second block what happened. The third block is where I go interview several thought leaders and opinion leaders about this development. And the last block was added in 2019, and that is about anti-Semitism in the United States, which is now also rising. We never expected that, but it's happening. So that's the last part of the film.
Yeah, I have some questions if you want.
Yes.
So my first question is, why did you choose the title Never Again Is Now?
Well,
There was, when I lived with my parents, I was young, I lived with my parents, of course, like every other Jewish child of Holocaust survivors. I asked them, why didn't you flee? And why was Hitler not stopped? And they said, you know, the problem was we didn't take Hitler serious enough when he still had relatively little power. We thought, well, what he says, he's not going to do what he says. And by the time we had to take him seriously, he had too much power. We couldn't stop him anymore. So that's one reason why what we saw in Europe was a process of more and more anti-Semitic incidents that have to stop early on. That was the lesson I learned from my parents, the lessons from the Holocaust. Also, when I looked in, so in Europe, we had mostly anti-Semitism coming from the Muslim immigrant population. And I was wondering why that was. And so I looked into that. And what I found is that there is a deeply ingrained ideology, especially in Islamism, in political Islam, that fighting the Jews is a good thing to make wherever they are, is a good thing to make the world better. So that sounds very much like an ideology my parents had suffered from. And that is why, and if you look at the number of people in the world who are sympathetic to that ideology, is about between 25% and 50% of Muslims in the world are Islamists. So with 1.8 billion Muslims in the world, that's a lot of people who adhere to that ideology. And that makes it, in my mind, potentially as dangerous as Nazism was. And therefore we have to stop it while we still can. Now the question is how to stop it. Well, the violent part of it, like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, you can fight with military means and law enforcement means, but the non-violent part of it is much more difficult to stop. But what Rosa and I very much believe in is supporting the Muslim reformers Muslims who want to get rid of that ideology themselves. And they hardly get a platform. And we could help them by giving them a bigger platform. Also in our synagogues, we partner, we build bridges with all kinds of other faiths and religions. And we also do that with Muslim organizations, but we never partner with the Muslim reformers who want, like, even Reform Jewish organizations don't partner with the Muslim reformers. They partner with the most orthodox, often Islamist organizations. So I think supporting Muslim reformers is one way to get rid of that totalitarian and also anti-Semitic elements that are still playing a big role in the Muslim world.
What is the déjà vu you have from Europe in America?
What is the déjà vu that we have? Well, Rabbi, that is scary, really. When you watch the movie, you will have seen how gradually this anti-Semitism anti-Semitism became bigger in Europe. And up to, I would even say, this day, a big part of the Jewish population still in Holland is in denial and will not acknowledge it. When we came to the US 15 years ago, we were relieved to see how proud and out and loud the Jewish population was all over the United States. We were not used to that. But to be honest with you, unfortunately, what we have seen starting very small, but now unfortunately snowballing into something that becomes bigger almost by the hour, is a growing anti-Semitic trend. Even today, before we started, I heard one member of the congregation, about an anti-Semitic incident that happened today in a school. And today also in the US, a big part of the Jewish population is in denial. And so we believe more than ever, it is important to speak up and to address this issue. So yes, I see a lot of deja vus now compared to what I saw in Europe.
Also, we see a response to big immigration from the white supremacists against immigrants, but also against Jews. We also see on campus, like in Europe, on campus it becomes much more anti-Zionist. Jewish students have to declare in public that they don't identify with Israel in any way. That's what we have seen in Europe as well. And another deja vu is what happened, for instance, in Texas 2 weeks ago. We've seen much of that in Europe before. So, and the two attacks on synagogues by white supremacists, we now also see in Europe. We haven't seen that for a long time, but we saw it in Germany quite recently twice. So it seems the developments are all going in the same direction wherever we are in the West.
Yes. I have one more question before we open to everyone. What do you think of the response of the Jewish community in America to the rising anti-Semitism?
What Rosa just said was there seems to be still a lot of denial about threats to the Jewish community, which we understand because Jews in America have been so safe since the beginning. I'm not saying there wasn't any discrimination, but they were safe. And we start to see a bit of a difference, of a different development there. So it takes time to admit that, probably. The Jewish organizations are now focusing big time on security. So, and that's understandable because of the murders, terrorism that has been going on in the past few years. So you will probably get also more of that strong, how do you say, security that whenever you go to a Jewish building, you have to pass metal detectors and guards and all that, armed guards and all that. More intensively than you do now. What we miss in the response of the Jewish organizations is the realization that a big part of this is actually not prejudice or the good old prejudices against Jews or the good old stereotypes of Jews. There is a kind of a war going on against Israel, globally in a war with weapons in the Middle East itself, but with words here in the West. So if you look what is being said about Israel on social media, what was being said last summer after the conflict with Gaza, it was a way to, it was a total, defamation of Israel and Zionism, and demonization of Israel and Zionism. And that is not a matter of prejudices, it's a war strategy of Islamists, of Hamas, that they try to do everywhere in the world to steer public opinion in the West away from Israel, which will weaken Israel. And my feeling is that the Jewish organizations in America are not enough looking at it are not enough defining it for what it is. So they still teach and start education programs, more education programs about prejudices and stereotypes, but that is not fighting an ideology that is against Zionism.
Yes. So I would like now to, anyone has a question or a comment, please unmute yourselves, and Evelyn and Rose are going to answer your questions. Jamie?
So recently in America, there has been calls for regulation of social media, and a lot of the social media are now actively trying to suppress hate sites. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, words matter. And as a European, I have the inclination to say it's a good thing to do that. Because we are not used to the First Amendment. We don't have the First Amendment because in Europe, because of the Second World War, because we don't want people like Hitler or with talk like Hitler to affect and recruit new people. But in America, you have freedom of speech. So in the American situation, I would say it's not good if you suppress one source of information or speech, then the next one will come after that. I think in America, it's better to let speech compete in a free market and have people stand up against this kind of hate speech, and instead of suppressing it.
Another question or comment? Josh?
So thank you for making that movie and for sharing it with us. You know, as somebody who works with children, what, you know, positive message, what outlook, what like trajectory and path can we talk to our children about, you know, with anti-Semitism? Because personally, I don't think it's going away anytime soon. You know, you said before about speaking up about it, you know, against it and managing it. So what, you know, positive direction can we lead our youth to?
I think that's a great question. Thank you for it. What I would look, when I was a child, which was in the 60s, right? The message I got, I went to a Jewish school, the one and only Jewish school in the Netherlands. The message I got was, be proud and love Judaism. Be proud of it and enjoy it, because there's a lot of goodness in it, right? And if you live according to Jewish values, You're a good person, and don't let the world tell you anything different. That would be my message.
I also think I agree with Rosa. I also think it's important that parents and grandparents, the adult environment coaches children in being proud Jews, but at the same time, how to face, how to deal with the negativity that could come your way. Help them deal with it, and also it's important for children to share these experiences if they're negative with other children and other parents. We've seen groups of not children but college students,
adolescents,
and high school students, and they felt so alone in being isolated or criticized for Israel, and it helped them a lot to share it with each other.
Very true.
Yes. Maureen, unmute yourself, please. Or maybe ask you unmute.
Sorry that took so long. I'm so proud of Evelyn and Rosa for their work, for the endeavor that they have made to create this video that Evelyn has done. It's just wonderful to have this audience for them, because their message is so important. Something I worry about, I worry about young people not caring. I mean, I think that there's just not enough awareness in younger generations. They have forgotten to teach their children. And then who wants to bring up, anything sad for children? We don't really want to, but it's so important to carry this message on. And in any way you can support Evelyn's efforts, please consider it. I know that she has much work ahead of her, and Rosa is her partner in this. And I wish them every success in their efforts. And I thank them for being with us tonight.
Thank
So
you so much. And thank you for
Doug,
making that possible. Thank you.
for everything you both do.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
That is certainly so crucial. I mean, we are just one voice with the film, but we need all your voices. Actually, a writer in Los Angeles saw the video, saw the film, and called me and said, "Why don't we start a podcast about anti-Semitism?" And we did. So we have a weekly podcast now called Never Again Is Now podcast. It's on YouTube, it's on Spotify, and it's on Apple Podcasts. And what we do is we discuss different aspects and different locations of anti-Semitism going on now against the backdrop of the Holocaust. And we give people tools, try to give people tools to speak up against it, because my voice, Rosa's voice, is by far not enough. We all need to speak up, do something to make heard that we don't accept the progress of anti-Semitism. So please give it a try. Never Again Is Now podcast, a weekly podcast, and hopefully that will help all of us and all of you to do something against anti-Semitism. Speak up somewhere, whether it's in a small way or a big way. But we need everybody making noise about this development in America.
Now.
Margie?
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for being here and for your efforts in this field. I grew up in Latin America as a Jew, in one of the largest pro-Palestinian countries in the world. I'm from Honduras.
Oh, wow.
I'm one of 100 Jews in my country. And then I lived in Michigan, which has the largest Middle Eastern population in the United States, in Dearborn, Michigan.
Oh my God.
And we now live in Tampa, and we have one daughter who's 27 and was afforded every opportunity to be Jewish. Went to Hebrew school from the time she was 5 until she had her bat mitzvah, went to Jewish camp. She taught at Jewish camp. And then we made the critical mistake of allowing her to go to Barnard University at Columbia. And she now considers herself culturally Jewish. Not Jewish, but culturally Jewish. And it breaks my heart because my husband's father survived 5 concentration camps.
Oh my God.
Most of my great-grandparents' generation was annihilated in the Holocaust. But today, I see a semblance of hope, because today a second cousin shared her father's story. He was a partisan in Poland, and he was the only one in his family who survived. And she sent me the book of her father's history, and I sent it to my daughter, and I saw a ray of hope, a little bit of chipping at that very leftist, anti-Israel, anti-Jewish mentality almost. So what advice do you have for us, parents of 20-some-year-olds who have been given and afforded every opportunity to be proudly Jewish and have been brainwashed by the woke left in this country? And I'm going to shut up because I get very emotional and disturbed by this.
I understand. You want to go?
Yes, so the woke movement is relatively new. And we see a combination of high ideals for equity for everybody, but we unfortunately also see that by woke the world is divided into 2 categories: the oppressed and the oppressors. And in that philosophy, Israel belongs to the oppressors,
The Jews too.
and the Jews are white in that philosophy, so they also belong to the oppressors. Obviously, it's very America-centrist, because if you look at Israel, more than half of the population is not white. And if you look at our past, the whites have never accepted Jews as white. But that's all overlooked by woke. And so, if young people want to fight for a better world, and the movement today that pretends to do that is woke. So also Jewish students have the inclination to join that movement, and also there is a kind of a threat. If you don't join it, you're ostracized as a white supremacist. So for Jewish students, the problem is that they want to join woke, they have to join woke, but woke is anti-Israel and anti-Jewish. Now, how to deal, and especially the social threat, if you don't join it, is very powerful. So how can you deal with that as a Jewish student, and how can you support Jewish students as family of them? I think Jewish students cannot turn this around easily. What we have seen is that discussion groups of Jewish students where they can discuss this phenomenon, where they can exchange experiences so that they don't feel alone with it, about it, is very important. I've seen one Jewish student write a paper about it, that woke is not recognizing the vulnerability of Jews. But I think it's important to help Jewish students who cannot really resist it, to help them to acknowledge that they are in a situation where they cannot speak up, and try to help them and coach them to keep their own Jewish values, at least in their own heart, and not let the environment rip that out of their heart because they threaten them. But it's a very hard and very new situation we're in. And I don't know, do you have any additional advice?
Yes. First of all, Margie, thank you for sharing this story. I hear your pain. And if there's one thing that I can say to you is that you're not alone in this. We hear stories like this all over the world. And it's a painful situation, which I totally see. And to Evelyn's point, not one that is easily resolved. What I think, what my first thoughts are that come up is much in line with what Evelyn says is, I think lots of our Jewish student children that are on campus right now must be in some form of identity crisis, whether they admit it or not, whether they, resist their parents or not, right? But it must be in there. And I'm afraid, or maybe it's a good thing, I can't say this, that at some point they'll be confronted with it. And I think, look, I'm not a parent, but I have lots of godchildren, I can say that. The only thing I can say to you is that at that point, be there for them. But in the meantime, find like-minded or people that are in the same situation where the children maybe can connect. Because there must be, I'm convinced that in your daughter's heart and mind, there is more conflict than what you see. There is, and she needs help with that. But thank you, because it's very courageous to bring this forward. I totally recognize that, and good luck with that. And if you want to continue to talk about it with us, just personally, feel free to.
We're always here.
I would like to invite Marcy Baker, president of our congregation now.
I just really want to thank Rabbi. I want to thank Doug and Maureen for making this program possible. And then obviously Evelyn and Rosa, thank you so much for taking your time, sharing this powerful film with us, introducing us, answering our questions afterwards. This has been a really, powerful event. And I thank everybody who helped organize it and be here with us. So thank you guys so much, all of y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And for watching the film. Thank you for that too.
How many countries have you shown this documentary?
Oh,
so we were in basically all over the world, apart from Asia and Africa. Latin America has embraced this movie beyond our wildest expectations.
Jewish Latin America.
Jewish Latin America, yes, sorry. Thank you for that addition. So we have had screenings like this in Brazil, in Argentina, in Colombia, in Venezuela, in Mexico. And of course, in Europe, we have been in every country. Yeah, it's gone wide across the world. On YouTube and Amazon combined, we now have over 120,000 views. We're still growing. From our side, please tell your friends, because again, the wider we can spread the message, the better it is. And our goal is that not only on one day per year, January 27th, we say never again. We should say it every day. And we should say it now.
Yes. Somebody has another question? Jamie?
Not so much a question. I have a comment. I am a Jewish professor, and I do support my Jewish students. I do talk and have a dialogue with my Palestinian students also. So, and I think that's part of the solution. And there's more than one of us that's Jewish at Polk State College, and we work hard at maintaining a good environment for all students.
That's fantastic. That's
That is
fantastic.
great.
Thank you for sharing that.
One other thing too, I also support the renewal of Jewish life in Poland, in
Fantastic.
Krakow.
Wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the JCC there.
Fantastic. That's powerful too.
Any other comments or questions for Rosa or Evelyn? I would like to end with asking everybody to please rise, and I would like to recite El Maleh Rahamim for all our brothers and sisters that perished in the Holocaust. El Maleh Rahamim Shochen Evambromim Hamtze Menucha Nechona Al Kanefei Ashchina V'mahalot Kedoshim Utehorim Kezoar Arakia Mazirim Lenishmot Kol Acheinu Bnei Israel Shenidvechu Bashoah Anashim Nashim Bataf Shenechneku Veshenisrefu Veshenergo Shemasru et Nafsham Al Kiddush Hashem V'Gan Eden Temenuchatam Anaval Rachamim Astirem Beseter Knafav Leholamim Utzror Vitzror Achaim Et Nishmoteyem Adonai Nachalatam Veyanuchu Veshalom Al Mishkevoteyem Venomar Amen. May their memory be always for a blessing. And as we always finish a Yom HaShoah program saying never again, and today we're going to end saying never again is now. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Doma Marin Khan. Thank you, everyone, for attending this program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all
Thank
very
you.
much.
Yes,
Have a good night.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.